Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday evening, recording a little bit later than usual, but a lot to get into on this episode. We're going to talk about the latest from fall camp for the Georgia Bulldogs. We're going to talk about their first scrimmage of fall camp, what Kirby Smart, what players had to say on Tuesday as they grind through another week of camp and get ready for that second and final scrimmage this upcoming Saturday. Dive into that scrimmage a little bit, what we want to see, what we want to learn from that scrimmage, and we'll finish things off with a little Georgia basketball. Go ahead and subscribe to Dogs 24/7 if you haven't already. Subscribe to the Dogs 24/7 YouTube. Come join us on the website. We got a 50% off sale right now. Had a lot of folks join over the weekend with the intel we were able to get from that first scrimmage. I hope those folks felt like they got their money's worth. And if you haven't jumped on board yet, I would highly encourage you to do so. So let's get this episode going. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday evening, talking all things fall camp with the Georgia Bulldogs. We're going to jump in to that first scrimmage from Saturday, what we learned, what stood out to us. We're going to talk about what Kirby Smart and players had to say on Tuesday. Look ahead to the second scrimmage, which is coming up on Saturday, what we want to learn from that, what we're looking for, and we'll finish things off with a little Georgia basketball. But, Ben, let's get right into the talk of the weekend, that first scrimmage for Georgia. I'm just going to kind of shoot from the hip what I remember, what we talked about with folks, and I'll let you talk as well about what stood out to you. Biggest things to me, Adrian Maddox getting good run at safety with the first team defense. Just reading between the lines, it kind of feels like Corey Thomas, Adrian Maddox, that is quite a race. Though Zion Branch is trying to make it interesting. And Zion Branch had an interception in that scrimmage, so trying to make his case for the starting role. Heard some good stuff about Juan Gaston as he continues working, pushing, trying to make that right guard battle interesting between him, Daniel Calhoun, Michael Uni, and we'll play a clip a little bit later in this episode about what Kirby Smart had to say about Juan Gaston. Heard good things about the run game. Roger Robinson sounds like had a strong day, which I felt like he really needed, given just how deep this running back room is and trying to earn a role. Chauncey Bowens, I've heard he has had quite a camp and that he had another strong day as well. Good stuff from the receivers, which we're going to talk in depth a little bit later about those receivers. But Noah Thomas with a really strong day, was told he had a crazy touchdown catch in that scrimmage. London Humphreys had about a 50-yard catch. Some big plays there. And, switching back over to the defense, Christian Miller, I was told, had a good day. Jordan Hall as well. And, those two guys to me check some big boxes if they can continue that play. I have been really honed in on that interior defensive line because I feel like that is such a key for Georgia. And I'd say, too, I think that on the whole, the top two quarterbacks, Gunnar Stockton and Ryan Puglisi, played well. Don't think they were perfect. They both had an interception in that scrimmage, but both made some big plays along the way. I think nothing to worry about or get bent out of shape about when it comes to the quarterbacks. On the whole, I think the defense had a pretty good day, though tackling was not where Kirby Smart and the staff wanted it to be. Don't think that came as any kind of surprise when you consider, one, they haven't done a lot of live tackling at this point, and two, the standard in Athens when it comes to tackling super, super high. So, Ben, what else? What have I missed? What else do we need to talk about from that first scrimmage?
I think you covered the main pieces that I was going to touch on right there. I mean, there were receivers who made plays. You mentioned Noah Thomas. I think London Humphreys, again, another transfer wide receiver that I don't want to say people have forgotten about, but isn't being probably talked about enough just based on what we've already seen him do in a Georgia jersey and what he's been able to do in practices, scrimmages, those types of things. I think on the whole, the defense won the day from my understanding. I mean, I think they forced some turnovers. I know the first team offense struggled to get the ball moving on the first couple of possessions of the game. I think that's typically what you want to see from a first scrimmage is your defense wins the day, but you show signs with some big play ability on your first team offense. I think Georgia's done a good job with that. I think I continue to be intrigued by the running game and the running back position and what that's going to look like this season. But I think on the whole, you nailed it. I mean, Adrian, in terms of just position battles, Adrian Maddox getting some work there at safety. You mentioned Juan Gaston getting some opportunities on both spots on the right side of the line of scrimmage. Like those are some of the ongoing position battles, not to mention, I hesitate to even call defensive line work position battles this time of year just because there's so much rotating that they do. It's a matter of who is playing their way into playing meaningful snaps and meaningful moments. And, names that keep popping up are Joseph Jonah, John Ye, Xavier McLeod, Jordan Hall, Christian Miller, like the usual suspects who you would expect. So it's not totally surprising, but I think just a reassurance that the names that you've heard a lot about that haven't played a bunch at Georgia yet, they're having good fall camps.
I want to shout out to the tight ends was Total Ice Williams, Ethan Barbour, continue to look the part. And there's a few positions on this roster, Ben, where I don't envy the coaches when it comes to coming up with snap counts because I think they're in a very good position. But I've written about it, already this fall camp. I think it's about inside linebacker. It's a good problem to have. You'll figure out who needs to be out there and what they need to do. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the receivers, but first I wanted to play this clip of Kirby talking about Saturday's scrimmage. And I thought it was interesting, Ben, you and I were there on Wednesday when he was asked about the weather. And he basically said, that they've been blessed so far. A lot of overcast, a lot of rainy days where they're not battling 9,500-degree heat. You could tell that Kirby had been kind of hoping we'd have a little bit more of that leading up to that scrimmage. But on the whole, Kirby, as we'll hear in this clip, I think he came away pretty pleased with the afternoon.
The temperature made things not as trying, not as mentally tough. I thought the speeds were good. You look back over the years, and the first scrimmage is always a lot of heat, and also they're coming after hot practices, so it's not just that day. It's what's happened the previous 3 or 4 days, and the totality of practicing in 110, 105 heat index a couple days in a row can take its toll in that scrimmage, and that wasn't the case this time. I don't think that's any indication that we're in any better shape. I think it's just an indication of the weather. So really competitive drives, several long drives. I was pleased with the effort for the first scrimmage. We didn't tackle exactly great, which is the first time we really tackled live. We've done a little more live tackling than we have in the past, so we did do some prior to the scrimmage. But I was really pleased with the effort on special teams. I think that's where we set ourselves apart in scrimmages because we do the special teams within the scrimmage, and we didn't have, we had guys competing for spots on those units, and I thought they competed really hard. So I was pleased. Some silly procedural penalties both ways, but pleased with the effort of both groups. We're just not where we need to be yet.
I want your opinion on this, Ben. I think if you're a Georgia player listening to that, and again, this is a few days removed from the scrimmage, so maybe Kirby would have been more fired up on Saturday. But I think on the whole, maybe Kirby came out of that first scrimmage feeling pretty good about where Georgia is.
I've just gotten a sense all fall, at least, that he has a sense of confidence about this team. It's sometimes hard to fully diagnose how Kirby Smart feels about a team because he is very coy with the way that he talks about everything in these press conference settings. But he does, I believe, think he has a team that he's confident about. And I think more than that, he has a team that I think works hard and practices hard. At least that's the case of what we've heard and seen so far up through this point in fall camp. And I think that any team with that type of identity is always going to be on Kirby Smart's good side.
That's a good point. I want to shout out some of the people who are watching this live. Tim Taylor in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. David Williams down in Americus. Appreciate y'all tuning in and watching. And, hey, if y'all are watching this live, let us know where you are. We'll shout you out. Ben, I wanted to talk about, we mentioned some of the big plays from the receivers. Really interesting earlier this week, our buddy Matt Zenitz from CBS Sports on the new College Football Insiders podcast, really talking up these Georgia receivers. And, what Matt shared on the podcast was there's a lot of confidence within the Georgia program about this group, and that the receiver room, quote, may end up being the most talented overall group that they've had going back to the AJ Green days. Now, again, that's a situation where we're talking about depth. We're not talking about one single guy, but I mean, if you listen to that, and especially if you remember some of those receiver rooms back then when AJ was at Georgia, I think your ears have to perk up. I mean, just based on what we've heard and what we have gotten to see in very limited opportunities, I think there is something to what Matt Zenitz is saying, and that this team and this offense has a lot of potential in large part because of what they got at wide receiver. What's your read on the receiver room right now and just what Georgia's working with there?
I'll admit I haven't gone through and done the revisiting last year and all of the key moments where there were big drops and how it shifted the momentum of offensive possessions, how it changed just the statistical output of the offense on the whole over the course of the season. But anybody who watched Georgia football last season knows that was the weak link on the offensive side. No matter were there issues other places, possibly you could point to certain things that didn't go great, but Georgia's inability to have guys that were able to get open, catch the ball at a consistent rate, ended up being, I don't want to say the downfall of the season, but a contributing component of that. And so I think it goes without saying Georgia's offensive, weapons, wide receivers are going to be more consistent just because Georgia just had a historically bad drop rate last season. It's not like Georgia's going to have historically bad drop rates 2 years in a row, or you would think. I think, again, I've said it all offseason, testament to James Coley, changed the game. You bring him in for a specific reason. That's to flip the roster. You look at what Georgia has been able to bring in the transfer portal over the last 2 cycles: Colby Young, London Humphreys, Zachariah Branch, Noah Thomas. There has been a concerted effort at the wide receiver position to upgrade the talent level and the experience level at that position. I think that you add that to some of these younger guys, and honestly, London Humphreys should still qualify as one of these younger guys when we're talking about him. But one of these younger guys like Talon Taylor, CJ Wiley, Thomas Blackshear, Tyler Williams is the name that I think sometimes Landon rolled in, but I think sometimes Tyler Williams has been mentioned as like the afterthought in that group. That should not be the case anymore based on everything that I've heard so far through fall camp. Like, he has really excelled and stood out coming off of that injury from the spring as well. So I just think when you talk about the sheer numbers and bodies and talent level at that position, I mean, again, I haven't even mentioned Sokovie White, who's someone that needs to be getting mentioned when we're having that conversation as well. And so, yeah, like, it's reasonable to think that Georgia's upgrading at wide receiver. And again, I said this all last year. Everyone used to complain about Arian Smith. It's like, well, they're throwing the ball to Arian Smith as much as they are because he's the only guy that gets open. I mean, there's, I think that I think it was in the Zenitz clip, but it could have been Bud Elliott, I believe, on the Cover 3 podcast, also had something to say talking about the Georgia offense. And like, Dylan Bell was the wide receiver 2 last year for a majority of the year. Like, he's probably not the wide receiver 2 going into this season. He's maybe with the second unit. And so because of that, it's just natural to think that the wide receivers are going to improve. And I expect Georgia's passing game, especially down the field, deep balls, explosive plays, to be in a category that it hasn't really been in recent history.
I'm right there with you. And, I wrote coming out of SEC Media Days, like, is this offense being overlooked? While all the while acknowledging, that it was understandable after last year to really wonder. But I think they've done a fantastic job reloading that receiver room. And the thing, Ben, as you were sort of explaining the additions and what they've done to this room, the thing that strikes me is a lot of these newer guys are experienced guys. Noah Thomas is about to be a senior. Zachariah Branch is going to be a junior. You've got London Humphreys now in his second season in the program, but he is a junior at this point. You've got Dylan Bell back. You've got Colby Young back. These are guys that have been there and done that, and I thought that showed up when Kirby was talking on Tuesday. He was asked about leadership in that room, and he said it's a lot of leadership by committee. You have a London Humphreys. The other day, Mike Bobo said Colby Young kind of sets the standard as far as work. you need talented guys, and you need guys who can go up and get the football and bring the ball down in big moments. But for me, what's about as important as that is they got a room of guys who have been there and done that. And I think that, that gives the coaches, I think, a lot of confidence in going out there and be able to win with these guys.
I'll add to that. I mean, I have heard that Colby Young has really been like the offseason leader in that room. I think he's someone that everyone is sort of looking towards. They know that he's, other than probably Dylan Bell, Colby Young has done it more at Georgia than any other player that Georgia has at receiver right now, which says a lot since we really only got a third of a season of Colby Young last year. And so, but I think that he is, approach this offseason the way that Georgia coaches would want him to. And I think that a lot of people in that room have followed suit.
I'm paraphrasing Mike Bobo here, but he said something along the lines with Colby that, he's grateful for the opportunity. I wrote about this, I think it was last week, that, there was a realistic possibility that he would never play for Georgia again. And Georgia wrote it out with him through that legal situation. He's back, and I think he's going to play a really big role in this offense. Wanted to shout out real quick, Will Dickerson, Trenton, Georgia, David Johnson down in Fort Pierce, Florida. Appreciate all y'all for watching this live. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're watching it live, let us know where you are. We'll shout you out there too. I want to take a quick break, come back and talk about what Kirby Smart had to say on Tuesday. A couple of interesting little clips that I have from Kirby's time with the media. We're going to talk about that second scrimmage, what we're watching for, what we need to see. And then we'll finish things off with Georgia hoops. Before we take that break, again, I want to encourage you all, go to dogs247.com, subscribe. We've got our fall camp special right now, 50% off. A lot of good intel. We've had some good nuggets over the course of camp, and we don't anticipate that to change, especially coming up on that last scrimmage and getting ready for the season. That's going to be let's see. As we're recording this, we are 18 days away from that game against Marshall. So we hope you guys will get on board and stay on board for football season, basketball season, baseball season. It will be a fun time over on the Junkyard, and we hope that you guys will stick around and ride out another fun season with us. So take a quick break now and be right back. All right, Ben, hopping into some of the stuff that Kirby Smart had to say on Tuesday. Really encourage you all, go to Dogs247's YouTube. We've got the full video up of Kirby there. Also, Dogs247.com, we got the full transcript. But wanted to play a couple clips of Kirby that I thought were really interesting. We're going to start with one of the battles we talked about at the top of this podcast, right guard. And Kirby was asked about Juan Gaston, a guy that give Ben credit here. He shouted out Juan during spring practice, and that there was a quiet confidence around the coaching staff about what Juan could provide and his potential even as a true freshman. Kirby provided a little bit of insight on that, where Juan is at this point in fall camp. Here's what Kirby had to say.
Juan got to get in better shape. He's a talented player, but he plays a lot of snaps, and as his volume goes up, he struggles to sustain, which is usually the case with freshmen. They just can't handle the volume that the practice load that they get, and he's growing at that. He's lost 25, 30 pounds since being here, but he continues to work hard and work with the ones and the twos in pickups, pass pro pickups, and the different things he has to do.
So Juan is trying to make this thing interesting. And Ben, I thought the thing that was the most interesting right there for me was Kirby talking about his weight loss. He's down 30 pounds. I remember, listening to, I think that was, in January or February when Juan was weighed, and it was like, man, this is a big guy. He's going to have to cut some weight. But just based on what we've gotten to hear, it seems like he's approached his first offseason as a Bulldog the right way, and I think he's very much in the thick of this right guard hunt.
Well, the thing about Juan Gaston is if you were to line up all of Georgia's offensive linemen and just watch them work and look at their body types, like he is the most first-round possible offensive linemen that Georgia has on its roster. Not to say that nobody else can get there or has the ability to be there, but like if you were to say who's the first rounder in the future, you're probably going to get most people voting for Juan Gaston. And so I think that alone, just a talent level standpoint, is going to make things interesting for everyone else. It's funny, you mentioned I was talking about Juan in the spring. And quite frankly, the reason I was talking about Juan in the spring is because I thought he was going to give Ernest Green a run for his money in that right tackle spot. And, some of the feedback that I've gotten throughout the spring and a little teaser to something that I'm planning to write at Dogs 24/7 later this week as well. Is like Ernest Green's a guy that I have heard nothing but positive feedback on in terms of what he has done this spring into this fall in terms of really latching on to that right tackle spot. I think Juan's still getting some work there as well, but I think you're right that it's that right guard spot. And hey, when I talked to Stacey Searles back at the Sugar Bowl, in December or January, I was asking him how do you see him fitting in? Where does he fit? And he says, look, like you think he's 6'8", he's going to play tackle, and he might do that one day, and that's likely what he ends up being for Georgia in the long term. But right away, getting on the field, your best five as fast as possible. Juan Gaston's a guy that's going to make it interesting at offensive guard. Now, do I think that he is going to be starting week 1 at right guard? Probably not. Do I think that by the time Georgia gets into the heat of SEC play, that it's going to be getting interesting for Daniel Calhoun and Michael Looney and possibly even for Ernest Green again, like just depending on how things start at the beginning of the year? I mean, I think the right side is where you're likely to see Juan if you see him early in the season, though I do know that he's getting some reps on the left side as well.
I think the interesting thing to remember too, if Juan really shows out as we go through the season, we've seen Georgia rotate tackles. If Juan is really impressive, that could be a situation where every once in a while he spells Ernest Green and puts himself in a position to play legitimate snaps.
And I'll add to this too, our scouting team really got their final eyes on Juan Gaston down at the Under Armour All-American game at the beginning of the year. And you'll remember our scouting team boosted him up to 5-star status after seeing him. And beyond just what, you see the 5-star, you see the top 20 player, and, you make general assumptions based on that. But I had some conversations with people that were down there seeing him who were just blown away by his athleticism and his flexibility and all these types of things. And keep in mind, to your point, it was down at that Under Armour All-American game that he measured in at like 380 something, like 388, I want to say that it was, or 391 maybe even. And I remember there were some folks at Georgia that were a little bit alarmed when they heard that number. And look, credit to him, he's cut 30 to 40 pounds already since getting to Georgia. And even when he was playing at that weight, which was way too high for what Georgia was looking for, he was still impressing all the scouts that were down there with his flexibility and his athleticism. So I can only imagine once he gets down into that 330, 335 range consistently, just how much of a weapon he's going to be for Georgia's offensive line in the future.
Other clip I wanted to play is Kirby talking about Ryan Puglisi. Some of the intel, some of the notes we got out of this first scrimmage, really complimentary of Ryan Puglisi. I wrote earlier this week about the Bulldogs who I thought have helped themselves as far as going out there and performing really well to this point in fall camp, essentially halfway. And Ryan Puglisi was on there. Now, I put the caveat on there. I feel very confident it's still Gunnar Stockton's going to be your starter, but Ryan's done a lot of good things. And I think Ryan has shown progress in the, especially compared to this time last year, that I think he's feeling more comfortable. I think he's a guy that when you look to 2026, he's going to have a legitimate opportunity to start, although the competition is going to be fierce for that job. Here's what Kirby had to say about Ryan and the growth he's shown.
Yeah, he prepares really hard. He studies, he's smart, he picks things up. He makes mistakes, which they all do, and he learns from them. He generally knows when he messed up. He was walking off the field in the scrimmage and didn't change the protection on a play that he knew he should have, and he knew it messed him up, but he knew it right away, which is different than where he was this time last year. He was still trying to figure that out. So he's made some really good throws. He's more comfortable in the pocket than he's been. I think he understands things much better, and he has a confidence about him that has helped him. So his growth is a tribute to Coach Streeter and Coach Bobo working diligently with him and him absorbing that information.
I think this is a situation, Ben, where Georgia should feel great. Having Ryan Puglisi as the backup. And, it was a situation this offseason. I was a little surprised Georgia did not go get a veteran to be the backup. And that's hard to do in the portal. Any guy that transfers wanting to go play. But they decided, look, we're gonna roll with Ryan Puglisi, the redshirt freshman behind Gunner, and then behind him, two true freshmen. But Ben, just based on what we've heard to this point and what Kirby shared there, I think Ryan has done a lot of good things and put himself in position. I think, and I wrote about this earlier this week, you really want to try to take advantage of playing Marshall and Austin Peay. Try to get Ryan Puglisi in this game because I think he's got an opportunity to show that he can be an SEC quarterback.
Well, I think, look, I was getting some text messages during the course of the scrimmage on Saturday, like some live updates on things. And I think a lot of people in attendance feel as though that, right, and I don't think this is a shocking revelation to hear this, is a more naturally gifted passer of the football than Gunner Stockton is. Now, I think that Gunner's deep ball accuracy, and I've said this time and time again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm doing that because I think that's where Georgia is going to excel in the explosive passing game this year. But I just think when it comes to layering, the just natural look and feel of Ryan Puglisi's ability to pass the ball, it's going to look more aesthetically pleasing, I think, to the eye than Gunner Stockton. I just think that that's the way that it's going to be. And I think people that were maybe seeing Ryan really in truth for the first time in that setting, they might have, thought that he was the more gifted of the two. I don't say all of that to say there should be an uprising over who should be the starting quarterback. I believe, you believe, everyone believes that Gunner Stockton is and should be the starting quarterback at Georgia for a long list of reasons that I don't need to go on and, list out right here. I think it's always healthy competition to have a guy behind you that can push you like that. And I also think it is refreshing knowing that Gunner Stockton is the type of quarterback that might put himself into harm's way from time to time, that you have a guy that you can rely on. You brought up the transfer portal off season. Like, look, Georgia tried to go get some guys in the portal. It was hard to sell a couple of different things. One, it's hard to sell, hey, you're going to have a real chance to beat out Gunner Stockton. He just started for you to, in the Sugar Bowl, and he just won an SEC championship game for you. It's hard to sell that. It's just as hard to sell, hey, even if you're not the guy, that you're definitely going to be better than Ryan Puglisi. And I think that Ryan Puglisi was as much of a factor in Georgia not taking a transfer portal quarterback as Gunner Stockton was, because I think it was always going to be challenging without a surefire first-round quarterback hitting the transfer portal. It was going to be really hard to find somebody that was willing to come in and compete with Gunner. So I think as much as anything, Georgia took a stab at Fernando Mendoza. I don't think that they thought it was realistic, but I think of like the Deshaun Purdy recruitment that Georgia ended up losing out on, goes to Florida, ends up at Wake Forest. Like, that's one that I think would have made a lot of sense for Georgia. But if you're Deshaun Purdy, are you confident that you're going to be beating out Ryan Puglisi in the future? Probably not.
All right, let's turn our attention to the second scrimmage of fall camp, which will be on Saturday. We kind of did this on the last episode, Ben, but what do you want to see? What is the thing that if you hear this coming out of that second scrimmage, you'll feel really confident about where this team is?
Well, in part because he wasn't fully dressed out for the first scrimmage, but Josh McCray is now back. He's practicing. It's unusual that he was out for the first week of fall camp. And so what does that mean for where he fits into the depth chart? What does that mean for his workload? I think coaches probably still have questions about what does it mean for what he's actually capable of doing as a running back at Georgia. So I think if you're a Georgia fan, you want to be hearing that Josh McCray did something notable during the course of the second scrimmage. He wasn't able to be fully dressed out because he hadn't finished that 48-hour, 2-day acclimation period once he had come back. And so I think you want to hear something. Like we've heard positives about Roderick Robinson getting a little bit more involved with the ones. I think Bo Walker has really turned some heads at times. But I think when you go into the portal and you get a guy that has been productive in Big Ten football in the past, like you need that guy to produce for you at running back. And I don't think you want too much on Nate Frazier's shoulders. And I think that Roderick Robinson and Bo Walker will be able to offset some of that. Chauncey Bowens is a guy that I'm told made some plays during the course of that scrimmage that, has people's attention. But I haven't heard oh, Nate Frazier had this big explosive run play. Oh, Bo Walker took 155 to the house. Like there just hasn't been much chatter about explosive runs. It's been, oh, he's impressed. He's done some good things here or there. He's picked up some good chunk yards, but I think you want to hear something a little bit more explosive happened in the run game. And then I think individually, you just want to hear some positives about Josh McCray because I think it adds a depth and talent to that defensive or that running back room that Georgia's going to need this season if it's going to get back to its usual running the football ways.
And the thing that some of us were talking about on Tuesday that I think is very important to point out, because it's something I even take for granted. Let's say they get Josh McCray going. There was part of me that's like, man, they are super deep at running back. But think about pretty much every year Georgia gets into a season and 2 or 3 games in, you lose a couple guys. And it doesn't take very long, for you to be in a situation. I think it was 2 years ago where they were really banged up and really trying to just get through the start of the season. So, I think you might look at that situation and say, okay, if Josh McCray doesn't hit, that they're okay. Man, you need to be very deep going into a season at running back because, it's only a matter of time before a few of those guys get a little bit banged up.
Mm-hmm.
The position for me that I'm watching is outside linebacker. Elo Madozi, I think, has started a little slow, but I don't think that that's anything that's caught anybody off guard. You think about that jump from the group of 5 from Army to Georgia, you knew that it was going to take some time. So I want to see if we hear anything about him. Again, Quintavious Johnson getting in the mix. Gabe Harris, who I'm just fascinated. I think there's a real chance that he's going to play a lot of outside linebacker. He's got that defensive end possibility too, and we might see him with his hand in the dirt there as well. But yeah, that's my big focus is to see the outside linebacker room, hear what they are able to do in this second scrimmage, and then it kind of goes back to one of the points that Kirby made from the first scrimmage is tackling, because I think Georgia fans can maybe take for granted last season. That was a huge issue. That was a team that missed tackles. If I remember right, looking back at Pro Football Focus, that was the most missed tackles for a Georgia defense in a season, and this is according to their numbers, since 2015, which was Mark Richt's final season. So in the entirety of the Kirby Smart era, no defense struggled with following through and making tackles like that one did in 2024. So can they clean it up? Can they take a step forward? I think you typically will see better tackling in that second scrimmage, but saying you typically do and actually seeing that happen are two different things. So we'll have to see what we find out on Saturday. Ben, before we get ready to end this episode, I did want to bring up, I meant to talk about this before we started recording. I know a lot of folks over on the Junkyard were excited to see the behind the scenes at Georgia with John Gruden and Barstool Sports. I wanted to get your opinion. Did anything catch your attention from Gruden's tour over at Buttsmere? Anything that particularly interested you?
Really, it's just you don't get inside access to the Georgia football program. Like that with someone that has a camera, the ability to produce something like that, and then also has the track record of someone like John Gruden where he's having conversations with certain coaches. Like, the things that probably stood out to me most were him being in the team meeting room, specifically the quarterback room. I wish we could have gotten more footage of him with Bobo and those quarterbacks just going through snap counts and things like that in that room, just because that would have been fun to watch. Obviously, Kirby Smart is a big John Gruden fan. I was surprised how childlike and giddy Kirby got when he saw John Gruden and dapped him up at the practice and was just like, "You're the best." And they were like, "No, you're the best." But no, it was good. I encourage anyone who didn't get a chance to see it to go check it out, just because you don't get to see Georgia in that way. I'll also give another shout out if we're just doing other YouTube channels that I think have done some good content. Georgia's done some golf content on their main channel, the Georgia football account, with some former players, current players, some people that work in Buttsmere as well, that I think has been some good content that you don't really get in the Georgia world often either.
With that Gruden video, I thought it was cool, him kind of getting to see the nutrition side of it, eating dinner and also getting the post-practice shake. Seeing Will Muschamp, we don't get to see Will Muschamp around quite as much as we have in years past, so to see him there And then I did get a chuckle. I figured, Ben, you would appreciate this, where John didn't know where Kirby Smart was on the field because, I've done that before. And
so like,
John
where
Gruden,
is he? Like, where is he right now? It's so funny.
All right. One more thing before we get out of here. Georgia men's basketball. A little bit of scheduling news for Georgia basketball. We knew they were going to play in the Charleston Classic, and that is in late November, November 21st and 23rd. But we learned on Tuesday their first round matchup in that little 4-team tournament. Georgia will play Xavier on Friday, November 21st. They're in Charleston, South Carolina. And then they will go on and play either Clemson or West Virginia on Sunday, November 23rd. That matchup, that trip is part of, really the strongest one. It's those two games are probably two of the best 4 non-conference games Georgia basketball will have this year. That's also including Cincinnati, and that's including Georgia Tech. But Ben, I wanted to get your opinion on this. This is the weekend of Georgia Charlotte. So, do you think you could, hold down the fort for me? Let me go to Charleston for the weekend, go see Xavier and watch a little Georgia basketball over the weekend?
I mean, Jordan, if you actually mean it and you need to tap me in, I'm all game for that.
We'll see what happens. I think what's more than likely is that if they were to win that Friday night game, 9 p.m. Eastern time tip. So I don't know that I'm going to go up there for that, but maybe if they win that one, we'll see them play either Clemson or West Virginia on Sunday.
Hey, anything you need from me? If you need me to go up to Charleston, I can take care of that for you.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. But no, an interesting non-conference matchup will be really want to see Georgia play Clemson because you got the R.J. Godfrey piece of this, and to see him play that. And then just, I think Clemson will be good again. I think they were, one of the better ACC teams last year. Georgia doesn't want to overload their non-conference schedule, but that would be a really nice early test for the Bulldogs.
No doubt about it.
All right, we are going to wrap up this episode right here. I appreciate everyone who watched or listened to this live. Thanks to everyone who's listening to this after the fact. Go to dogs247.com. Subscribe, as I mentioned before. Got our fall camp sale going on right now, 50% off. Want to shout out everybody who has taken advantage of that so far. We had a huge Saturday, and we really appreciate all of you who jumped on board. And, hey, if you missed it right there, come on board right now. We'll get ready for a big scrimmage on Saturday. Hoping to have some good stuff out of that. Go to our YouTube, Dogs247. Subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Go to our TikTok. Had some good content over there the last few days, thanks to player interviews and coach interviews as well. So we'll wrap it up right there. For Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.